right, it is 6:30, Monday, September 9th, 2024. We'll call the City and Mayor City Council meeting to order. If you could please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. With that, do we have any additions to the agenda tonight?
Mayor, I don't have any additions.
Hearing none, I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. With that, then we'll open up to public comments. If there's anyone who would like to discuss anything that is not on the agenda, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll close public comments. We'll move to consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda that needs to be pulled for further discussion? Hearing none, I'll look for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion.
Second.
A motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. With that, we will move to business items. First one is consider introduction of ordinance 245, amending City Code Chapter 152 regarding storage containers.
Thank you, Mayor. The Planning Commission, about a month or so ago, took up discussions on some of the code provisions regarding storage containers. Some of the businesses around town have storage containers on premise, and they want to take a look at the existing regulations, which did not exist, and they wanted to provide for a framework for storage containers to be allowed within city limits. So they crafted some language after a couple of meetings and bringing that up to City Council for review. So the language in here amends City Code Chapter 152, Section 152003 on definitions, and then also 152090 on outside storage. Under definitions, it adds the definition, would add the definition of a storage container is a container with strength suitable to withstand shipment, storage, and handling. Storage containers consist of large reusable steel boxes used for intermodal shipments and is designed to be moved from one mode of transport to another without loading or reloading. Down on 152090 on outside storage, under A, it would add language for storage containers and then meeting the requirements of the section. The bulk of the changes comes to Section F of outside storage. This is added at the end of E as a new section. And under F, storage containers shall be considered outside storage and shall be allowed in the agricultural district, the commercial and commercial industrial district. Storage containers shall not be allowed in residential districts, the C1 general commercial district, the C2 central business district, or the public institutional district while being used, unless it's being used on a temporary basis for construction purposes or moving, in which case the requirements of this section do not apply. Applications for storage containers shall be submitted to the city to be reviewed for zoning compliance under the following requirements, numbers 1 through 9. Number 1, accessory use. No storage container shall be considered a principal use and instead shall be considered an accessory use and shall not be located on a lot prior to the construction of a principal structure. Number 2, numbers allowed. There shall not be more than 3 storage containers located on a lot. Number 3, use. Storage containers shall not be permitted to be rented or leased to third parties for storage purposes and shall only be used by the owner or occupant of the lot. 4, dimensions. Storage containers shall not exceed the dimensions of 40 feet in length, 8.5 feet in width, and 10 feet in height, and shall not be stacked on top of each other. Number 5, location. Storage containers shall meet all accessory building setback requirements and shall only be located in the rear yard of the lot or in the side yard of the lot if the storage container is located in the rear 50% of the lot. But in no case shall the storage container be located further forward than the front of the building. Number 6, lot coverage. Storage containers, unless being used on a temporary basis for construction purposes or moving, shall count towards the lot coverage requirement of the zoning district the storage container is located in. 7, signs. No signs or lettering shall be permitted on storage containers other than what comes on a storage container as manufactured. 8, screening. Storage containers shall meet the screening requirements of section 152.091 screening of this chapter unless the owner paints the storage container an earth tone color to complement the principal structure on the lot. Screening shall be required when the storage container abuts a residential district or public right-of-way. Yeah, sorry about that.
Thank you.
9, exterior appearance. Storage containers shall be maintained in a good condition, free from structural damage, rust, deterioration, and shall be painted an earth tone color to complement the principal structure on the lot if the storage container is not screened per section 152.091 screening of this chapter. So the areas that are underlined are the textual additions. There are no deletions as part of that. And this is what Planning Commission is recommending up for consideration by the City Council, and the ordinance 245 that is part of this reflects these language changes as well. So the possible action items for council tonight is to approve the text amendment as stated and then introduce the ordinance as is, table the text amendment to a specific date and provide direction on the issues that have been discussed, or 3, deny the text amendment. So with that, turn it over to City Council for discussion.
All right. Any questions, clarifications on this that we need?
We're not having any current issues.
Other than there are containers which exist, and according to the existing language, they should not be there.
That was kind of one of my questions, to kind of go off. Chad, what are we fixing here? Have people complained? Are people don't like the ordinance? I look back at similarly to golf carts, where we had people come in and say, hey, can you take a look at this? For what has this been? Are we fixing something that didn't need to be fixed? Is this a problem? Is there?
I've only have had one complaint, and it was in passing. So nothing.
A complaint that they're not allowed?
That there were storage containers and they're not allowed. What are you going to do about it, kind of thing?
Okay, but not someone complaining, hey, I want to put one on my property and the ordinance says I can't. Can you look at the ordinance?
Right.
Okay.
As it exists now, there are.
I understand there are probably complaints, but probably something we should have dealt with at the time, I assume, but.
And this will deal with the complaint. Is the resident aware?
So the two are not connected.
Okay.
So the one question was, have I received complaints? Then the answer is yes. A couple of years ago, I did get one. That is aside from how this came to be.
Okay.
This was brought up a handful of months ago by Planning Commission when they were looking at some other things, and they said, well, what about storage containers? And it just got brought up. And so brought up by a commission member. John talked about what the current ordinance currently allows, which is nothing. And then they said, well, perhaps we should deal with this because we know there are storage containers
I
around town.
understand, and I get that, and I think that's great that we look at all our ordinances periodically and say, can they be adjusted? That's good, but
Now, is this gonna,
if we have it, we don't allow them, and we're just changing it because people have them and they're not supposed to, that seems backwards to me.
Like, are those people coming in saying that they want to be zoned properly? or-
Those people should be told they can't have them, they need to
Right.
remove them. That's our ordinance. And then if they came to council, say, hey, would you mind looking at this for that? I think that makes sense. That's where I'm a little confused by this.
are we gonna run into any issues like with the fire department's training containers with this ordinance?
The Planning Commission talked about that, and the decision was those would be exempted out
Okay.
because they're not storage containers for storage in the sense of what they're, it's it's a structure that is built for training purposes.
Just want to make sure.
Brought to council, the fire department brought that council, and council approved that for that exact reason. They're not for storage.
Just want to make sure.
They're training. Yep, their training is simulate, they can
Don't
put
want
fires
some-
in there, simulate a house for fires, and they're
Okay.
obviously not gonna.
Rules
build
for thee,
wood-
but not for
Wood
me.
walls every time.
Right. I just wanted to make
So
sure
that's,
that we're
that-
covered.
yep, that's already taken care of.
My question to that, and I know somebody from planning commission asked me if we ever planned on stacking them. We did as we were starting to set this up, had talked about, possibly stacking one so we could have a, basically a 2-story type,
Mhm.
training that we could have a stairway up into something, stairway down into a basement, type scenarios. So down the road, would that be something that would be still allowed?
And that's still a separate case. I think that would be handled separate and probably likely be allowed just because it's trained, it's a whole different,
I think that,
it's exempt from this.
Right,
yeah, I think it's outside of the scope of what this is
Yeah,
meant to
right,
cover.
Right.
It's an exigent circumstance
right,
where not everybody is going to have storage containers set up for training purposes.
right.
It's going to be the fire department.
I know of 2 of them around town and there may be more, but I'm
Yeah, I
just
just,
not sure why we're changing this to satisfy something that's already there versus going to them and saying, hey, you can't have them. Come to council if you want to, come with your argument and
yeah, I just don't think we're very good at enforcing any of our ordinances, to be honest. So, I guess I think if the planning commissioner doesn't see an issue with it and they're existing and we're not getting complaints, I don't have an issue changing this ordinance. But does it set a precedence for other things like, other ordinances that are out there, right? We're going to talk about the parking on the streets and, different things like that. So, I see Mayor's point, but,
and same thing, I see what you're saying, but I think if our rationale is we're changing things because we can't enforce things, so we're gonna change it to make it so we don't have to enforce. I think that's that's
Yeah.
simply the wrong way to manage things, I believe, but, and again, I'm not certainly opposed to them, just wasn't sure why they're coming to us.
So perhaps then it, under the field of jurisprudence, there is a concept of ripeness when it comes to law. And the concept of ripeness is you could bring a law forward or a complaint or a case forward, but is it the right timing for it? Have we received anything that is like you're saying, a complaint? Are we fixing something that is fine as it stands now? There hasn't been really complaints about it. And is there a need for this at this time?
And I'm fine with what you're saying. And I mean, commercial, it's clearly commercial use, not residential, and the setbacks and the painting and the maintenance and the screening. And I understand all that. So, I mean, I'm fine with what it says. I just,
And I agree with that.
right.
I would like to, there's one section about what we consider short-term. I think I'd like to define that a little bit more. But no, to your point, yeah, I'm okay with how that's worded. I'm really okay if we have them. I'm just not, I just struggle with, we shouldn't be doing it just too sad because a couple of people are doing it and we can't enforce it. And on a side, and I'll let that go. On a side note, what about pods? Would pods be included in the shipping container?
I would assume.
So they
Like moving pods,
So,
residential moving pods?
would
type of
put
thing?
something in there for, because we can't have them in residential areas, correct?
Temporarily.
Temporarily. And that's where you get back to your question on,
On how we define some of that. I wouldn't even mind a little section separate for pod, for the residential ones.
Well, and it is in there for moving.
we don't
purposes.
Yeah,
we don't
but it-
define temporary, I think was Mike's getting
Oh,
at.
okay.
So on a temporary basis, well, okay, it's temporary. How long is temporary for a pod to be there?
Mhm.
10 days, a month, 2?
I've seen
3
some
weeks.
For longer.
Yeah.
Well, and right, and that could,
Like the way
someone could
people-
throw one in their driveway and, and maybe it's 6 months.
Maybe they just bought one.
I don't know, maybe, you don't want to give them 2 weeks because they got to move and get it in there and do their, but I think a little more definition around that, I would like to see, but,
I would agree with that.
and
Just a little bit more.
during construction, is there anything we need to put in there if we move forward that kind of, I don't want someone to buy a property and throw a storage container on there because they're going to build and they're using it for different things or living in it or, you know,
Well, and that's kind of like what he says.
things
about
like,
it can't be on the, unless it's principal structure.
oh, it did, did I miss the print? Oh, the.
But it says
principal
this
use.
doesn't, this
Oh,
section does
consider
not
principal
apply.
Use, yeah.
So in that
Yeah,
circumstance,
that- I think
circumstance, you would be, so to clarify on that, if a building is being constructed, you could have a storage container on site for construction purposes before the principal structure goes up. Once the principal structures go up, and let's say you want a storage container for inventory purposes, you have to have your principal structure up before that permanent storage container sits there for inventory purposes.
But I think they did a good job. I
Mhm.
think what they've got there is good. I'd like to see something more wrapped around temporary or perhaps some, if it's 3 months, but then come to a city administrator to get, an extension on that. Or, I mean, I don't want to make it where they, if it's 3 months and it's going to be 3.5 months. And it's like, nope, you got to get it out of there where they can come up and at least talk and get some,
Mhm.
an extension,
So go back, get more definitions on the definitions for temporary for construction and residential moving purposes, define those a bit more clear. And then I want to touch back on the basis of the ripeness of this ordinance. If they bring it back, is it something you want to consider, or you want to send it back and say, define those things, and let's just keep this one on the shelf until the time comes when we really need to consider it?
if they've gotten this far into it, me personally, I'd be okay if we can get some of this stuff defined. I'd be okay making the change. I get that we should be proactive on certain things, but I'm also, on the other hand, I don't like to fix problems that aren't there.
I just don't see this being a huge problem in the future. I mean, it's good perhaps that we're addressing it, but I don't see it being a huge issue.
Now, when I read through the planning commission notes, is there anybody that has more than 3? I thought there was at least one, and then it was going to be grandfathered in, is what the conversation looked like. So I think we need to talk about that. If we're going to say it's 3, do we grandfather in anybody who's got 4, 5, or 6? I don't know what the number was.
Then we're back to making things specific for 1 or 2.
Right.
As of today, they shouldn't have any.
Right.
True story.
So if 3 is the number, I mean, if that's what we cut. With this now coming up and being talked about, and if for some reason this fails, I think we have no choice then but to enforce. I mean, it's now come to light, and we would have to have everyone get rid of them. Do we have an idea? Is there any way to find out who has them, how many?
Drive around and
Yeah,
take
I
a
don't know
look.
if that should matter. But we might be missing something. Maybe if we talk to the person who has more than 3, maybe we're missing something. Maybe 3 is not the right number. Maybe it should be 4. And then I'm okay with that if there's just more information we're missing.
Yeah, I thought I read that.
3 seems like a lot to me. I could see 1.
And then, right, if they have, let's just say they have 4, are they within their ground cover?
right? So I'm getting the sense, remand this back to planning commission for a bit more review before it comes back once again
I'd be comfortable with that, yeah.
with the notes discussed.
Should we need a motion on that?
Yep.
All right, then I'll look for a motion, unless there's any other questions or any other comments we want them to look at. I'll look for a motion to send this back to planning commission with the notes that Nick has taken.
Motion.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. Thanks, Nick. And with that, we'll look to next business item, consider approval to purchase skid steer replacement for Public Works.
All right.
It does say that, Peggy, but it doesn't say who.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, staff is proposing to purchase a new 2024 T66 Bobcat track loader. The skid loader is normally due for replacement every 4 years, according to the Public Works Capital Improvement Plan. Staff would like to trade in the city's current skid loader now on a different machine that'll better suit the Public Works Department. The city's current skid loader is new with low hours, resulting in a high trade-in value. So this is kind of the route we want to go, is to a track unit, and we want to take advantage of that high trade-in value now versus in 2 years when it normally would be due for replacement. Since hiring additional public works staff, the city's toolcat has begun used drastically more than the skid steer loader. By purchasing a track machine, it'll free up some of the tasks that the toolcat does that our current skid loader can't do. One of the main things is mowing the compost site, ditch areas, right-of-way areas. A couple meadow areas that are really soft and wet. Track machine would just float right over everything, and it works really, really well. Mowing the compost site, track areas. It'll also serve as a better tool in the parks and on the trails because it doesn't cause the damage that the current machine does. When you turn a current machine going across the trails, edges of trails, it kind of bends, breaks, tears stuff up. When you spin it around, a track machine kind of floats over everything. The city's current skid loader is one of the most important pieces of equipment that the city owns. Staff uses the skid steer for numerous tasks, including snow removal, park projects, lift station maintenance, large deliveries, road maintenance, compost site maintenance, etc. The T66 track skid loader is a size smaller and will be much more efficient and economical. Staff has put a lot of time researching, demoing, and testing track machines to ensure this is the right move. Staff is proposing to purchase the new T66 compact track loader from Lanu Equipment in an amount of $16 after trade-in value. Total cost breakdown, the total for the machine is about $98,000. We get a Sourcewell government discount, which is about 33%. That's about $32,000 off of that, making our price for the machine $66,675.17. Trade-in value for our S76 is $50,675.17. Total cost to boot for trade-in is $16,000. And this would come from the 435 fund. And Nick can probably talk a little bit more on that if he wants. Otherwise, you got that little video queued up, Nick, on the.
This one?
Yeah. Scotty out there mowing the compost site. It's really ruddy. Take our current machine out there, you'd be up and down, all over, getting stuck. So this floats right over everything. Bigger horsepower, really mows down all the weeds real nice. Foot smaller, you fit downtown, plowing snow tracks on it. Be able to grip good in snow. That was always kind of the big downfall. Their track machines were always a little slower and they weren't always the best in snow. That's why we don't have one in the past, but they've gotten a lot nicer and everything. So
Talk a little bit more about the size difference of the current one versus the one we're looking at now and the advantages of that.
yeah, so size difference. So weight wise and everything, it's relatively the same, but with the tracks, it's about 5 pounds per square inch. So you could literally run over someone's foot and they wouldn't feel it at all. It was, it's very light on its feet type thing. You float over when you're grading and dragging. You don't sink in. You can side hill nicer. Our current machine we bought during COVID, couldn't really demo it. It was our replacement for our old 650. When we got it, it's about a foot longer than the 650. much bigger, about 500 pounds heavier, but it made a huge difference, at least to us, compared to our old machine. So this one's about that same size, but with the tracks, or same weight, but with the tracks, it makes it, you don't even notice it. But it's a size smaller, same horsepower, smaller frame, but it can pick up the same amount of weight almost as our current machine can too. So we're being a little bit more conservative in downsizing and everything, but we're not really losing any of the capacities or whatever from our current machine. And it's still high enough to dump in the dump trucks and all that other stuff. If we go any smaller, that gets a little tough being able to dump in the dump trucks and that sort of thing. So.
And our existing attachments for the current skid steer will transfer over to.
Correct. Yep. Everything will work with the toolcat with this. And currently our toolcat's getting used a lot, and we're, one guy's out watering flowers or using it in the parks. Another guy could be out chopping the compost site with this machine, right away areas that currently you can't do side hills with any of our machines. And we've been weed whipping it. And then we got the Ball Club's old 4-wheeler that we've been using for quite a bit of things, that the old brush hog on it. So it's not ideal or the safest, I guess you could say. And this would definitely be able to handle all that.
So on the finance end of things, as Kyle mentioned, this will come out of the 435 fund, and we'll touch a bit more on the CIP when it comes to this. So we've got CIP set up for the 435 fund. Right now, under this heading, this is the S76 Bobcat that we currently have, and that's the one Kyle is proposing. We have that in an every 4-year schedule. We got this one in early 2023. It was approved for purchase in 22. We paid, where do I have it? $16,701.77 for our current machine. So how it works with the public, with the CIP in general, we have our incomes up top, our cash balances, what's spent throughout the year, and then we have ending fund balance. The idea being the ending fund balance should always be a positive number when we're putting funds away. So when we look at the current schedule, when it would be replaced in 2027, if we look at shifting this whole thing, let me just grab this real quick. Do my spreadsheet magic. So when we look at this, the numbers below, if we shift the purchase forward, impacts it a bit on the front end, but as you can see, overall minimal impact to our fund balances. It just shifts the purchase up a couple of years rather than waiting till 2027 for that.
And this is a nice working document that I kind of put together. And even like our lawnmowers, we are scheduled to get a new one every year is kind of how we have it all laid out, but we don't just replace it just to replace it. So we haven't really had, the last couple of summers have been really dry. So we haven't put many hours on the lawnmowers at all. So this year we decided, no, we can get another year out of the lawnmower, still have low hours, still have low maintenance on the machine. So we'll push it off one more year. So now this year we've definitely mowed quite a bit. So probably next year we'll probably rotate one of them out. But this year we were scheduled to get one, but we didn't. So we pushed it off. So.
Yep, normally this one, you would have seen it in this slot for 2024, which is about $7,000. But as Kyle said, decided to push that off, or we deleted that one out, since it didn't make sense to trade it in at the time.
Right.
And this did come to Public Works, and we had discussion, quite a bit of discussion around it, and the recommendation was to bring it to council, that we thought this was the right thing to do at the time. Now that we have an extra person in Public Works, make sure they have the right equipment, and then take some of that load off. The toolkat's much more an expensive item, and if we can take some of the load off that to keep that trade-in value when it's ready, we figured it's going to be, could even come close to a wash, from the 16 grand we're at now, if we can save some of that toolcat hours. And with the nice trade-in value, we're still getting a pretty nice trade-in value on the existing one.
And so does Lano have one in stock?
Yeah, actually, so that was kind of, the one we demoed there is the one that they'll sell us. And yeah, you kind of got a surplus of machines. Normally on state bid, you got to order a machine. We got to wait months to get it. But now with this Sourcewell government, it works a little differently now. So we can buy the machine that they currently have in stock, which is there. So, and they had two of them as of last week. They still had two of them. So, or one of them for sure. So we should potentially be able to get it tomorrow, if not sometime this week. So
That would be my other question. Do we wait until 25 so it's on a every other year for budgeting purposes? What else comes out of the 435 CIP?
The 435 CIP functions as it's basically the general fund CIP. So it contains things for the community center flooring, the gym floor, the community center roof, HVAC units. For public works, it's got the lawnmowers, the tool cat, the front end payloader. All these items, no, I don't want to do that. All these items you can see here, we have a cost associated with them. And then how it works is this part of it is the working end of it, where we have an inflationary factor that gets put on this to predict what the price will be down the road. The nice part about this being our own document is we get to update this as we please rather than waiting for a consultant to do it. So these costs down here are brought up into these slots up here, and that's how those costs get calculated. Why that? Because that's what it is down here. And so with that, we have expected life for these pieces of equipment. And again, like Kyle said, this is our general rule of thumb that we go by for replacing this equipment. If things are still in good condition and we can push it out another year, hey, great, we'll do that. Just like we did with the lawnmower this year. But if we get a lawnmower or another piece of equipment turns out to be a bit of a lemon and we got to replace it sooner, we have that ebb and flow. So how it starts out with our fund balance up here for 2024, starting at 221,705. We get income from the levy, which was approved by council as part of the budget for 40,000. And then if there's any interest income, because we invest funds in each of our funds we put into investments, so they'll garner interest returns. And then down here we have an general idea of when things are going to be slotted in based upon the years and the hours of our current machines, like we have slotted here. So dump trucks, payloader, that was purchased in 2020. So our next replacement out is to 2040. So if we go, I'll bring it up here so we can show years out to 2040, boom. There you can see that's in there. So you have your income, you have your inflows, your cash inflows, your balances. And then what we look at doing is down here with the end fund balance, we want this to remain positive so that when we go to purchase a piece of equipment, the money's in the bank, ready to go. So as you can see here, it keeps a pretty decently high fund balance throughout. So this, when we look at this in future years, we look at the fund balance as we come here, and then we ask ourselves the question, do we need to levy this amount? Or what can this be adjusted to? So we're not over levying, we're not under levying, we're hitting that right amount.
And it looks like next year there's a side-by-side on there.
Yep.
Yep. And that's also going along with hiring additional public works staff. I asked Nick, we could definitely utilize that type of machine now again versus having another pickup, because we know we talked about having another pickup, but I think this would be kind of the more of the route to go.
Way cheaper than that.
We'll certainly have more conversations.
Yeah, we'll have more.
We
Yep.
Yeah.
we just heard about this at the last Public Works meeting.
Right. Yep. And
So-
so that, yeah, not even, that's just a budget number for now. Next year, within the next couple of years, kind of time frame, right? It's
Right, yeah.
kind of what we were thinking on that. So we kind of threw it in for next year. If it works out, great. But, one more year, it won't hurt us either. But yeah, I can make the argument at a later time though. So.
This is one of the great parts about having this being our in-house document, and is we can ask these questions, why this and not here? And then we can talk about it and make adjustments and really dial it in to suit our needs. Any other questions for Kyle on the skid steer end of things?
Anything else? So hearing nothing more, I'll look for a motion. Could you go back to the numbers back on there, please? Sure. I just can't get mine to populate. I'll look for motion to approve the trade-in of the S76 and purchase the T66 for a total cost of $16,000.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
I,
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. With that, we'll do council reports. Councilmember Wagner, anything to report on?
I have nothing.
Councilmember Hell, anything to report on?
Not at this time.
Nope.
I'm
Not at this time.
I was blanking out. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. Councilmember Fauch, thank you. I was thinking of Nikki for some reason. Yes, I'm sorry.
Nothing.
And I had Public Works meeting. One of these items we just talked about. The other we'll be discussing at the work session after this. And we just started planning for our 2025 street project for upcoming. So, and that's all I have. So with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. We are adjourned. I apologize.
You're
I
fine.
blanked out.
Trying to whisper it to you.
It happens.
Look at them getting big.
He's sitting there.
Oh, now we have public comments.
If you don't mind. All right, with that, we will just jump right into the work session and we'll call that to order.
Thank you, Mayor. For the first item up on the work session tonight, discussing the Mayor Fire Department 125th anniversary celebration. With that, let me get a couple of images going up here. So I'll tee it up here real quick, Andy, then I'll have you take over. So the fire department got a hold of me last month, start talking about their 125th anniversary celebration that will be coming up in 2025. And so we have, they've been doing the bulk of the work. I've just been playing some sideline stuff, helping line up things. And they provided me with some additional information on this that we'll discuss tonight. So they're looking at having a band that will play some stuff, potentially some stuff going on during the day for kids, families, that sort of thing. Setting up an area you can see here for beer garden, beer tent, food, stage, and what have you. And rather than spoil too much of it, we'll turn it over to Andy, who's been dealing with it far more closely than I have at this point.
Mayor, council, so yeah, next year being the fire department's 125th celebration, we'd like to hold an event, have probably all the details we have not worked through. The reason we kind of started trying to plan real early to get a band scheduled. You need to kind of plan this early out, otherwise their schedules fill up. So we started talking about it to fit that. But tentative plans would be in the afternoon, we'd probably have some type of bouncy houses, some fire prevention things, maybe demonstrations, things like that during the day. And we'd serve food, food. As things kind of roll into the evening, then we would have, I think the potential, we've got one band that said that they would donate their time or whatever, possibly have them play earlier and then a second band kind of after that. guess questions, thoughts would be, we have talked about making Shimcor for that event, a one-way road so that we could get utilized parking on both sides of the street, maybe somewhat out of a diagonal, so we can get more parking there. I have spoke with Pete Johnson that has the empty lot right adjacent to us. I did talk to him about utilizing that area for parking, and he was fine with that. We would talk with some of the other businesses and stuff like they're letting them know that the event is going to be happening, and that not that they would have any concerns or it would be a Saturday, September 20th is the date we're looking at right now. Usually a Saturday, most of those businesses aren't in operation, so we don't feel that it would be an inconvenience for them.
Great.
Any questions?
So a couple of things. One, I appreciate you coming a year in advance on and working on this with us. That's great. Very much appreciated. I love the idea of it. I think it's a great idea to do. My only concern is parking. Have you considered maybe having to do a shuttle from somewhere, from City Hall or something? I understand the additional part, but this is going to be hundreds of people, I'm assuming. So I just make sure we think through parking so we're not running. We have additional. Is it field or is it paved, that additional?
It's a field.
Because if it gets rainy, then is it going to get you?
Grass lot, it's pretty high ground.
Think through think about some of that. I think maybe a shuttle might be needed from somewhere. Maybe from Mary Lutheran High, even if we could partner with them but I just want to make sure we have parking is not an issue. But otherwise, I think it's a great idea.
I think we should be able to, we'll definitely dial in parking. The idea is cut it off right up here after Casey, so
Yep.
Casey can continue to have access. Cut it off at the south side down here. Make this a one-way the entire way, and then you have angle parking on both sides.
Yep.
So you get one lane of traffic down the center, two sides there for parking and angling in to try to get as many cars as you can.
Saved, he's got posted there. So the front of the station, the area, the parking areas right in front of the station, we would have for handicap people, so that that is addressed.
Sure.
Would it be possible to ask the other business owners if we could use their lots if they're not running?
I'm sure, knowing a number of them, I don't think it would be too much of a problem.
Good.
So there is a couple extra, open areas, as well along that street that could be potential other additional parking spots. But
When you're gonna have people coming and leaving,
Yeah.
Yeah.
throughout the day. So I think it'll be okay. That's quite a bit of parking.
I think we could probably map it out a little bit to get a decent idea of how many vehicles
We should be
can
able
park in that area to see if it will be enough. It's a huge guess on how many people are going to show up. Not having anything like that to base it off of is a little bit tough, but
Right.
It'd be nice in that additional parking if you could paint some lines to
I think we would probably
encourage people to,
have somebody there kind of in the beginning to get people to park sensibly to maximize the parking.
I think this is great. I completely support it.
Any other questions?
I don't have any.
And as Andy and I has discussed regarding, there would be perimeter fencing put up here, gated in here so that you don't have minors in there obtaining alcohol where they shouldn't. In a controlled environment, they talked about having wristbands to make sure people were vetted to ensure it all goes well.
Yeah,
For the most part, it's kind of pretty much surrounded. The only place we'd have to basically put a fence is from the corner of the building up to Public Works
fence. Yeah.
fence. Otherwise, we're fenced all along that north side, the back is all tree line.
And by fence, that's as simple as snow fence, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Do you have to stay in the beer tent or can you
Nope,
purchase?
that's just
and-
basically where we would, where we would be selling the beer.
So then from like 10 to midnight or whatever, is it 21 plus?
No, it would just be, we would wristband people. Minors would have, wouldn't have a wristband, and, those that were of drinking age would need to be wristbanded and stuff, so that it would make it easy for the sellers then to see that.
And I think a lot of those details, we have plenty of time to work through, right? I mean,
Yep.
that's going to be all fluid. You're looking more,
We just wanted to
Right
make
now,
sure
so
that
is-
everybody,
is
the
this kind of a
council was okay with it, so we
you can
can
book the bands.
book a band, because we got to put a deposit down and stuff to do that.
Yeah.
So,
Do you want this to come to next council meeting to approve this initial part of it, just so they have that, so they book the band, all of a sudden it somehow doesn't fall that we've committed to this from a council motion?
I took it as long as we're not hearing any huge red flags tonight, that's
Yep.
passive approval type of thing. We don't approve anything at work sections, but,
Thinking about could be new council members coming in the next year.
oh,
And so it doesn't make sense to do that. And I'll let you decide, you and Andy can discuss that, but it might be worth doing just to know that it's locked in.
right?
And like I said, all these little details, I think we work out throughout the year. I think you guys will take care of that. This is a great idea. This will be great for the community.
I'm gonna throw them back.
So any other questions for Chief Wetzel?
Mm-mm.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you, Andy. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's great.
You're welcome.
Need me for anything else?
I do not.
Okay, we got another meeting.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, Andy.
All right, with that, let's move to the Mayor Baseball Club structure at City Hall.
Thank you, Mayor. This one, let me get resumed here. So this one comes, I've been having discussions with the Mayor Baseball Club. They currently have storage facilities and it's getting a bit on the expensive side for them. So they've been looking at options, and most recently, I allowed them to utilize one of our storage closets here in the storage area for some of their business purposes. We weren't using it. It was standing free and open. And I do like to help out our local civic organizations. When we all work together, everybody wins in my book. So allowed to move them there, but the question then became, well, they have quite a bit of pull tab that they have to keep for auditing purpose, since it's a lawful gambling requirement. And looking at other spaces naturally then came to, well, is there space that the city has that they could store these? And unfortunately not at City Hall. It's just too much that we currently have space for. Perhaps in the future it might be indoors, but as it stands, we're utilizing our space. So then the conversation shifted towards, well, if not indoors, is there somewhere that it could be done? And in my discussions, and feel free to jump in on this one, Peggy. In discussions, they've been talking with Mayor Lutheran about having their class build a shed. And the location we were looking at is this area right in here. So this being City Hall proper, they're right here is the double doors that lead out the back of the gym. This is the emergency exit out the back on the way back. But we have this 17 by 20, 16 by 27 dirt patch here, this lawn patch here. And they were looking at a shed that would be approximately 12 by 20 in size. So it would fit in there quite well. In discussions with them preliminarily, the design of it, stick built, brought in, but we would want coloration, tone, and texture that would blend in with the existing structure. No hunter orange, no Viking purple, nothing of that sort. Something that would blend in and at least look well being tucked back within there. In talking with John, the city planner, this is not something that has to come to Planning Commission for review. This is something that can be taken up directly by City Council. So wanting to bring this to workshop before city council to get feedback on this, if this is something we want to do. Another component of this would be some sort of land use rental agreement to be put in place. So if they're going to have a shed on our property, I think it would be good and proper to have some sort of rental fee associated with that as part of it. And with that, then I will turn it over to council for feedback, reactions, comments, questions.
Don't they already make a rather large donation to the city?
That is, so that 10% is required by law.
So if they like bumped it to like 12, is that good enough?
I think we'd want a rental agreement in there of some sort that defines terms and conditions, just so each side
I
knows
think they would want that.
assurances
Yeah.
of how that relationship is going to work.
Got it.
Yeah, if I may, we did ask for a tenant agreement for the space we're utilizing currently. Right, more so of if it doesn't work out, we get some sort of notice. It's not that one day we come in and Nick says, hey, get your stuff out, right? So I would,
You mean baseball club?
Yes,
not
sorry.
city council.
correct, yes.
And are you a member on the baseball?
I am a member, yes. So, yeah, so I won't be voting on this. But the baseball club, right, again, to protect the city and to protect, their rights, we would want right, some sort of agreement.
Will that be in the way for any renters if they want to use those double doors backing up a U-Haul, backing things out? Is there room to get trucks backed in? Are we blocking off something?
No, currently, when they bring in, they back up right up here, and then they use this.
Kitchen access door?
Yeah, these are the double doors that they bring in.
Oh, okay. So it's not even close.
Kitchen access door is
Way back here, yeah.
Yeah, back
Got
there.
it.
Got
Okay.
it, got it, got it, got it, got
I
it.
thought that gray was.
I'm sorry,
the-
kitchen access is
the,
right here.
Generator.
Generator is right
Oh, I'm off. Okay,
There.
Now I see.
Yep. Generator right there, kitchen access is right there. These are the two double doors in the
And
back.
it's Beyond that, so.
So it's behind even
Yeah.
that.
I was one step off.
So this shouldn't interfere with any loading, unloading, anything of that nature.
Is it secure enough there?
There's cameras,
there
correct, Nick?
There's cameras.
Yeah, there's a camera that faces back that direction.
So it's more secure than what is currently being utilized.
Yeah, and I understand cameras, but we're not concerned, even though cameras, someone breaking in, taking something that's so important. I mean, would it be better in a gated area like compost site where we have the gate? Or, there's a lot of room in the compost site.
It's an access
Yeah.
issue though.
So
Well, there's.
the challenge is, right, they're in town at the bars picking things up. They've got to check them in
Yeah.
that we're using city hall, that the baseball club is using city hall space for.
Yep.
So it's the convenience of
Going out the doors.
all of it being
And
in
that's fine.
one spot.
That's what they decide
Right. I mean,
for you guys.
previously the baseball club had a shed on somebody's property that wasn't, I don't even know if it had cameras and, all of that. So,
The city will handle plowing to it. et
Yeah,
cetera.
we already plow off
that.
this area anyway.
Okay.
And it's not blocking like the antenna entrance
Nope,
tower. Okay.
nope. So the antenna's here, and then this is kind of the battery backup transformer area, and then the shed, the building is right there.
I think that's T-Mobile, I think, Nick. That's kind of that guy.
Yeah, the tower.
So they gotta have some sort of little something.
The shed would go in there, there'd still be room
Yeah.
to walk past here.
If the doors, I don't know if we can ask them how to build it, if, slope the roof away, have it, not a peak, but just one, then if we have the doors.
Worst comes to worst, we have equipment to move the shed if
Oh,
we
yeah.
have to.
Yep.
Feet, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah, we can.
worst comes to worst. Yeah.
Well, Mayor Lumber is bringing it, or I would imagine Mayor Lumber would. bring it.
no, we are contacting Mayor Lutheran High School to
Right.
build it.
Here?
To build it.
The shed.
Oh, I
Like in their
see.
shop, right?
Like somebody will have to
Portable or-
move it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it'll probably be built at Lutheran High.
Yeah, because Mayor Lumber is the only one big enough with forks big enough to bring it down.
Yeah, we got the payloader.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forget.
Yeah, as long as it's not too wide going on the road.
I forget the payloader.
but
No,
it is
I-
almost easier just to talk to the lumberyard. and have them haul it.
Yeah, I have no issues with it at all. I completely
Mm-mm.
support it. I want to be good partners with the baseball club. Like Nick said, we want to help out, and I do think we should have some sort of land agreement. I'm not talking about, we gotta have something in there, I think.
Definitely. I insist
But-
upon some sort of a contractual arrangement.
Yeah. I think that's best for everyone. But no, I have no problems with that. Good idea.
Any other questions
Other
from council?
comments? All right. Then let's move to 2025 budget update.
All right.
Just what Nick wants.
Yes. The right spreadsheet time, everybody. Here we go. Got some tweaks to the general fund for this go around. Looking at some stuff some more. So the changes that I have, as always, highlighted in yellow. First, on the revenue side for the general fund, looking at court fines and looking over the last couple of years, it's been 2,500 or more. Actually, year to date, we're currently sitting at $2,547 for court fine returns. And we're not even through the entire year yet. And the previous years have been above 2,500. So that being as it is, we have some good history there, bumping it from 2,000 to 2,500. When we get down to tower antenna rent, that was 49,000 at the last iteration. I have bumped that up to 54 now that we have payments coming in. The original 49 was based off of a spreadsheet I had that was trying to project numbers and calculate them out because we didn't have a payment history quite yet to know what the exact numbers would be. Now that we have some of that payment history and looking at that, put those numbers in, and all four of the contracts, I should say, the one main tenant with Verizon and the three subs, those have 3% price inflators or rent inflation for each year. So calculating that in, it goes from 49 to actually a little over 54, but rounding to 54 there based on those calculations. So an increase to 5,000. Other than that, the rest of the revenues on the general fund stay the same. When we get down to the expense side of things, we do have some changes in the general government side of things. For auditing services, this was at 35,000 the last iteration we looked, proposing we take that down to 30,000. Current year to date, we have spent on that $23,375. And we're not expecting a whole lot of expense towards the end of the year. The audit has been paid for. Anything else is going to be some reporting, some disclosure reporting, which is probably another 1,500 that they do annually for us, and maybe some odds and ends auditing services. Last year in 2023, our total outlay for this category was $31,486. But also keep in mind, that's when Tracy was hired, and a good chunk of money was intentionally dedicated to training for her from the auditors to get her up to speed. That training has concluded. She's no longer utilizing those services. So those, even at the 31,846, there was money in that. So I think we're going to be very safe at 30,000 for auditing services, bringing that down. Similar type of story for the engineering services. This was 25,000 in the last iteration, bringing it down to 20. We're just not having the general fund specific engineering that has been in the past. Touching back on auditing services, in 2019, this category had spent 44,000. In 2020, it was up to 54. 2021, it was at 55. And 2022 was at 70. So we've had a nice downward trend here where we've taken some of those things, brought them in-house with the CIP long-term planning, and then even having Tracy on board. She's doing preparatory work on audit end of things that is helping save time there too. So we're seeing gains there. Engineering side of things, again, we're just not seeing the kind of expenses we had in the past. Year to date, for engineering in the general fund, it's $9,409 out of a budgeted 25. In 2023, it was 28,000. 2022 was 28,000. And that's a miscellaneous odds and ends stuff. Not everything was being allocated to the 405 fund And we had some of the sidewalk type of stuff that we didn't have the fund created for yet. So now that those things are out of the way, we have the CIPs built, those that's really flowing well. It's not hitting the general fund nearly like it used to. So taking it from 25 down to 20, I think we can do that pretty easily. This one in green
Can I
here.
stop you for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yes, go.
Thought I could get in when you took a breath. Just a question.
Yes.
Do we ever look at going out to bid to see what other options we can get with our auditing services or our engineering services?
So yes, you can, our engineering, I would say engineering services in my engineering is engineering. They all take 17% on projects. And their hourly rates aren't that different. In my experience, when I've done RFQs in the past, request for qualifications, when it's in engineering services, for auditing services, you can do a request for proposals. So every so often, every 5-7 years, typically a city will go out and do an RFP if they so choose. We've worked with Abdo. Abdo has been really good. I have no complaints about them. But if the city did want to go out for an RFP to see what else was out there, we certainly could.
I was just asking. I mean, not that I have any complaints. I just thought now was probably a good time to
Yep.
ask the question.
And I've done a couple of RFPs for auditing services in my career, so I'd have examples to draw from on that. Moving down to telephone. So telephone, I got this in green. I'm waiting for feedback. This one pertains to MetroNet specifically. So MetroNet provides our phone services for the city. I was taking a look at our billing and it seemed on the high side. So we worked with them, did a lot of regrading on what we have for services just to match what we actually use. And we're going to lower that bill by about 40%. So we're going to save about $1,700 a year. But those changes were made recently. So I got to see what the actual bills look like before I go ahead and start adjusting things. So once the new bills get cranked out, we'll see this tweaked down. I just don't know by how much for each department. Postage, this is at 1,000, putting it at 250. This is getting more. The postage for this was coming because utility bills were being coded to general fund, which didn't make a whole lot of sense since they're utility bills. It should be more on the water sewer end of things. So that's getting coded more properly. That cost shift going out to be more appropriate then means we don't need to budget as much for here.
So does that mean the 750 is going to go back into a different one?
It'll get split between water and
Okay,
sewer.
but we're still at 1,000
No,
total.
nope, going down to 250.
I understand. Altogether.
Will the 750 be going to the two other funds and 250 stay in the general?
Yeah, so,
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
okay, yes, so yeah, it's still 1,000, but 750 is now getting
It's going
reallocated. to
into
water.
2 different or 3 different buckets versus one.
Right,
Okay.
because the whole share of it wasn't appropriate for general fund to be footing since they are utility bills, not general fund bills.
Makes sense.
Yep, sorry. Advertising, this has been more, as you can see, the 3,000 went to 3,500, 2,000 went to 3. More of the expense of what was happening here is getting absorbed here because it's better categorized, and similarly to here, this has been shifted more into these two funds or these two line item categories. So that's being reduced to 0 because it's all getting picked up here anyway. And just noticing that the trend. So reducing that. Miscellaneous general, moving 8,000 out of here because there were software subscriptions and other software related stuff that was coming out of miscellaneous general, and that's getting moved down. I can jump down here, down to the appropriate one down here, which is computer and software support. So it's recategorization of expense items to where they really ought to be. And some of those better recategorize. It's our copier lease payment, our annual lease payment for the copy machine. It's our website hosting fee. It's our record digitization subscription and a bunch of other small support items that were just in miscellaneous. Didn't make sense. So reshifting them down here from up there. Then we get down to travel expenses for city council. You guys don't go to a lot of trainings, so we don't spend as much on travel expenses. But it's never been this high. It's never crested over 1,000. And I looked back 3-4 years and it just hasn't. So taking this down seemed appropriate on that. Again, we talked about the computer end of things, adjusting that to compensate. Looking at professional services, the community center is getting used more than it has been historically. So when it's getting used more by events, we do have more cleaning expense. So what was 12, bumping it up to 13 to cover what cost we're seeing on that front. Getting down into fire protection for professional services on that. This is for when we picked up Ridgeview, them coming in. We do have cleaning services that come in to clean on a more frequent basis. We do offset by billing that back to Ridgeview, but to show it on the expense side is what we need to do. And then we see it on the miscellaneous revenue side as well. So it's a bit of an offset, but making sure we're budgeting appropriately. Again, the green one for telephone, we'll see how that MetroNet one shakes out. And then down to professional services for public works. That was a little too low. Well, we were at 2,000, tried to go to 1, wasn't quite right. So back up to 2. It just wasn't the right number for that. Other than that, we get down to the maintenance building. So this is the new, well, it's the public works building with the addition now. Brought it to 3 in 2024, anticipating the expansion that was put on. Looking like gas utilities will be more in that 3,500 to make sure we're covered.
Should you bump it another 5? Because what if this winter's actually bad?
Can
That's what
bump
I
it?
was thinking. I was
I'm
like,
sorry, I think that's a little on the weak side.
We'll bump it to 4 then.
I mean, if you're talking heat for that big section of building, $500 seems a little weak.
Old fire station?
Not right offhand. No, I don't.
But you probably get them and probably,
I don't
it is
know.
bigger than the old fire station, taller and everything too, so it's probably, but something maybe base it on.
Just seems like $500 seems a little weak if you get some 30 belows.
Yeah,
and
and
some-
we're, I promise you, we're not keeping a 80 or anything.
Well, no, but I mean, you know what I'm saying though?
No, it's more like
If you,
76.
if you actually get a winter
Oh, yeah, yep,
compared to last year, oh,
yes,
Yeah.
yep, I do agree with that, so it wouldn't hurt. Rather, you know,
I'd rather be safe
be
than
high, and then
sorry.
you can always lower it the next year, so.
Yep, bump it to 4 there. That is perfectly fine. Under Parks and Rec, bumping this from 3 to 5,000. This is the miscellaneous, general miscellaneous one. This is where park board events get expensed out of. So when they expand doing music in the park, like they have done this year, when they expand doing the Christmas lighting ceremony, when they add things to that, this is where those costs go to. And since they are expanding their events, making them bigger, better, adding a little bit more in there to make sure that they can accommodate that. Down to compost. Why this is an orange is because I had it, when I sent this out in the packets, it was at 6,500. When I relooked at the numbers again for today, I used the wrong hours for Rick. I don't know where I grabbed those other hours, but I double checked the hours for Rick, and it's really more, should be 6,000. So not 65, but 6,000.
What the heck, Nick?
Now, when you stare at him for hours on end, sometimes.
I don't know how you do it. I'd have all kinds of mess numbers in there.
So yeah, with those adjustments, keeping the property tax that they were, we had generated an additional $10,750 revenues over expenditures. My recommendation will be leave that as is, leave that where that's at. We've talked of $450,166. Let that be the preliminary levy. It's good. It's still downward as we see on the levy spreadsheet. We're still going to be lowering the total levy by about 2% downward, even at this amount. And if we make some tweaks, we can, in December, we can always drop it by 10,750 to the final levy.
I just got a message saying that I'm supposed to tell somebody that there's a door open on the water tower.
I know, I haven't felt like climbing up there yet,
Okay.
so.
We're just airing it out.
Yeah.
I thought you were raising birds.
Message
there or
says,
something
tell
now.
one of your city boys there's a door open on the water tower.
We are well aware.
No pun intended.
It's about 100-foot climb, and I
Oh.
thought about it after lunch one time. I'm like, no, wait, they will be done this week, just to avoid 100 more of those comments.
On the water fund,
Sorry.
I don't have one on the, oh, I got a couple on the expense side. On the revenue side for the water use charge, we're slated for a 2% increase. However, this is something I want to talk about. I'll close that. Get out of CIP. Get up to the utility rate study. We're a little premature on this conversation, but I just want you guys thinking about it as we dive into the enterprise side of things a bit heavier when we get into October and November. Be thinking about this. So the debt service for the water fund specifically, in 2026, we have our one of our last big PFA payments, and it drops off, and then we don't have anything. We don't have major projects, maybe some additional expense when we go ahead and redo Second Street, that area. If we ever pipe in lines for the unannexed island that we've talked about in the past, that could be in there, but that will never bridge this sizable gap here. I mean, you're talking several million worth of funding here, which it won't come close to. It might bump it up a little bit, but so we have this gap here. And when we looked at our utility rates coming into 2027, because that's when the debt drops off, we're looking at, in order to keep a funding ratio, our goal of 10% revenues over expenditures for the utility funds that we discussed in the past, dropping it from what it is down to 66% of what it is. Get 64% of what it is, so dropping it by over 30%. We could potentially do in the future. So we know that this potential is coming because the debt's dropping off, and we're not looking to replace it with anything as substantial, which is a good thing. That means we can reduce our rates. How that plays then into the budget discussion is knowing this is coming in 27 in some way, shape, or form. When we look at this, it calls for a 2% increase in the rate study. When you increase this and we look down at our final number down here, it keeps us in the black. Now, we did it this year, and I'm going to switch over to the sewer fund. For 2024, we're riding in the red because we knew that sewer debt was falling off. And as you can see here in the next year, when the debt falls off, we know we have a project coming on, but we're okay with that flux in there because deficit spending is not necessarily a good thing unless you know what the end point is going to be. Similar situation for the water fund. We could choose to leave rates flat for 2025, knowing that if you do that, let's plug that in, keep it the same. That then generates in the red at this point. However, go back here and open up my other spreadsheet. Oh, no, I got to go back a couple here. To the financial reports. This one. I swear I know where they all are. So this is a spreadsheet I use to track where the funds are at, and this then produces the report, the financial report you guys get in your packet. So we look at the water fund, especially January through August so far. Our high water mark on this has been a little over $600,000. The idea being that over time, and our fund balance being you want at a very minimum 3 months worth of expenses as a balance when you're talking, making sure I'm talking a little $500,000 on that. And then you're sitting at 600,000, you're over 100% funded as part of that. So it's sitting rather well. The reason it dipped here is because we had the major bond payment. That was the major, actually, both major bond payments came out of there. But this one of the big ones here is the one that's ending in 2027. We won't have it anymore.
Nick, that's the balance that's in that fund.
Yes.
Okay. The
So-
626 was the high in May.
Yep. So this now in August, what you saw in you guys' financial report at the end of August, it was sitting at 423,752. And there's no major expenses because the biggest expense that we have, and as a one-time hit, happens in July. we pay it in July because the due bond payments are due in August. So we pay them in July, they hit the books in July, and that's why you see this dip in July. From down here to right here, that's the bond payment that's hitting it. Then over time, it builds back up, as you can see it doing here. Numbers keep increasing until that bond payment hits again, and then it drops it down. Looking at it from a graphical standpoint, because of course I have charts. Knock it off.
Sorry.
Here you can see the trend line of what that does, and over the rest of it, this will be climbing back up once again. So that's one component of looking at how you want to think about utility rates for 2025. Another thing that I've been tracking, if you've been looking in my reports, it's commonly over the last handful of months, the report has said that the water usage fees are tracking below target. And I was waiting to see how the irrigation season would end up on that. And the answer is we've been using significantly less water this year than we have in previous years. So we like to thank Alicia for pulling our reports from previous years. So we've got it split up into regular water usage and irrigation. We have the years on this side, and these are in gallons. So you can see here the 2020, 21, 22, and 23. It was in the 50 millions gallons used. As of September 9th, we're currently at 27,451,000 gallons used. Now, if we do some real rudimentary projections on that, we're probably looking at 37 million used under the water side, but then you can see the projection for the irrigation is under 4 million. When in previous years, we've been looking at over 3 times as much. So it's more approaching that 2019 levels. So this happens, it's been a wet year, people haven't been irrigating. But what the question then becomes is, what does this mean for our budget for 2024? Because we have an anticipation of things and water sales. Extrapolating this out, I am predicting that for 2024, this 494,000 will be more in that 380-ish thousand area. So we're talking probably a $100,000 shortfall just due to the wet weather and people haven't been irrigating on that. So that, again, that component I need to bring in, because if we're talking about not raising rates and we've had a shortfall this year, these are the components we need to be mindful of when we talk about where our fund balance is going to be if we want a deficit spend to not raise rates, knowing that in 2027, we'll be back in the black again because we'll only reduce rates enough to make sure that we're generating a surplus, a normal surplus for the utility funds. So not necessarily looking for any action or anything like this, just making sure this is on your guys' radar. So when we hit October, November to talk about things, it's not like, ooh, shock on that front.
So Nick, just so I understand, you're thinking 2024 is going to come in at like 390.
Yeah.
For the revenue.
Right. About 100,000 less. Just due to this versus that.
And when you looked at your crystal ball, you think next year is going to be
A drought or rain?
If I could
it's going to be a
predict
drought
that,
and we're going to make the money
You're
back.
in the wrong.
I'm probably fine with the 2% because we're keeping the taxes down.
if I could predict that weather, I would quit this job and be making millions elsewhere.
2027. Well, I would love that too, but
I don't want to raise them then lower them 2 years
Right.
later. I don't
And
mind going in the red.
significantly lower them.
Yeah, I don't mind going in the red.
I mean, a 30% decrease. Why would you raise it 2% to turn around and drop it 30?
I don't want to take $100,000 hit either.
And so like, I'm not looking for reaction at this point. Absorb it
Yeah.
at this point. I want to work on a little bit
Right.
with numbers, scenario. I want to run some scenarios here. How I think it'll play out depending on these
Oh
factors.
yeah, the $3,000. Yeah. No
Here's what
increase.
fund balances might look like depending on what. And so we go in open eyes when,
But Nick, so they're watering less, but we're also, running wells less, running big high service wells less.
Mhm.
True.
That kind of
True.
There's
May
helpful
not
on
see it
that.
in the 100,000, but it's in the operations, right?
Right.
So I mean,
That's true.
There is some offset on the operation on the expense side. Yes, for sure. I don't have a grasp of what degree, but yes, there would be.
Oh, come on, Nick.
that'd be tough to put together, but I don't know. You created what you could do.
I will run scenarios. You know I will. You know I will. I'll probably have 8 of them ready for you guys.
More charts.
More charts and graphs and spreadsheets.
But I mean, the electric bill for the water treatment, I mean, should be significantly less than what it was
I'm
last.
sure.
Yeah, Norm, we're like right around 9 million, and I got June and July's report. We're at 5 million. Normally we're closer to 10, 12 million gallons a month. So half of what
That's a lot of water.
our aquifers are happy now again, though.
Right?
Move some water a little bit again. So.
Oh, yeah. Did nothing but rain.
Something to noodle around, I'll certainly have it back. But from the budget standpoint, this one, okay, that was a change that I made. Well number 2, we only had $2,000 here for well number 2 was the only thing that in there. It's such a minor amount. I moved that down to here as part of just the general water end of things. We'll just shift that down into there, incorporate it to the other repairs and maintenance that we've got for there, and we'll call it a day. So that's the shift in the water fund. So if you don't do the 2%, looking at a little over $3,000 in a deficit, which I normally would never recommend, but knowing this is coming down the pike, it's something to consider.
Well, and the fund is healthy too.
Right. Fund is healthy. When you're looking at over 100% reserve fund balance, that's for utility fund, that's really good.
Right.
Normally, I would suggest a healthy fund balance is 6 months or 50%.
Right.
So your fund balance for that 300,000, we'll say. Quick roundup math, and we're double that now. Probably $100,000 less at the end of the year due to water consumption, but still good. Still good. Still very much healthy. Let's see. Have anything on sewer? Yes, sewer end of things. So for interest earnings, I bumped this up to 45,000. This has always been very low historically, since the sewer fund. I mean, we even go back to the spreadsheet. You look at the sewer fund, sitting on $2 million. I have 1.6 of that invested and returning interest, which is much higher than 16,000. In 2022, our interest earnings were 44,000. In 2023, the interest earnings was 55,007. Year to date is $37,468. And we've got 16 budget. I always like to budget this on the conservative side. So I think for 25, since we don't have construction slated for the wastewater treatment facility that's going to suck up funds, I think we're safe bumping this up for at least for 2025. We'll evaluate this, and when the water treatment facility project hits, that's going to draw down this fund balance probably to around $500,000 or so. And that naturally, with a bunch of that not invested, that'll then take this interest earnings back down as well. So that's a change on the revenue side. And professional services, I bumped it up to 4, just had a little bit more in that and tracking it. Otherwise, that was the changes for the sewer fund, and storm and EDA didn't have any changes. So that's my update on the budget end. Rolling right along to, we won't, I don't think, well, I'll just, sure. Talk about that. We talked about CIP, and for this, I just want to talk about structure, making sure we're looking. I know we looked at it last year, filled it out a bit more. Structurally, how it's set up, again, up here you have your income for the specific one, for the fire equipment fund, for parks, streets, and equipment. That thing gets calculated. We have our costs for things and when we think they're going to be happening. So for the small rescue, we had it for 2024. Turnout gear in 2027 for the fire. We're not looking at any super major purchases until 2029 when we're looking at replacing the 2000 engine, which is roughly on a 30-year schedule, give or take. So this could get moved out to 30, 31, depending on the condition and what have you. But we got it slated in there. And just like we look at for end fund balance, we want to make sure this is staying in the positive. So that's where if we may need to make adjustments up in the levy section, we can. But so far, this is sitting all right. Low point is in 2032 after we purchase a fire engine, after we, man, I wish I could, SCBA equipment, and then the 2000, I'm sorry, nope, it's a heavy rescue replacement, and 32 drains it down. Do have the money in the bank for those figures like we do before. My inflationary factor on things over the long term is 3%, and that can be adjusted. And if you adjust it, say you go 3.5, I'm sorry, automatically updates the numbers, which automatically repopulates up into here, which then readjusts all the numbers. So it all flows into comments over there, Kyle.
I love Excel. That's what I say. I use
You're
it
talking
as
to a
wastewater-
couple data junkies.
Oh, wastewater plant, I love it. Your formula's in, bing, bing.
I got a 3,500 line.
Gross. But love Excel.
Parks, on the other hand, working with the park board and getting this shored up, this one kind of hit the back burner because they spent all their money on pavilions and splash pads. So they don't really have money to budget for it necessarily because they're just going to start getting it again in 2025. And right now they're looking at a disc golf course, potentially, maybe some other small stuff, but nothing too major coming out of here. So we'll get that ship shape with the park board and recommendations coming out of them. Streets, we're working on getting this far more solidified. We've got seal coats and mill and overlays planned out into the future, working with Bolton Menk on figures. This one, I got to do some more working on because Bolton Menk got me the figures today and I plugged them in. And when we get into the mill and overlays for Fieldstone and some of the cold water crossings, it's going to dip us into the negative you can see here, which means have some financial work to do, likely means bonding of some sort. So we'll take out a bond issuance like we did for 2023 to pay for those mill and overlays, likely looking at a scenario like that, but we'll play with levy numbers, see how that comes out at, see if we can't mitigate that. But for 2025 at least, that's where we talked. Coming up here, the only thing we have here is the 2023 Hidden Creek and Shimcore overlay areas. Looking at those. So to get an idea of what that looked like. Nope, wrong one. That was 2023. So for that, we'd be looking at the blue area down here and the orange in this, seal coating those areas for 2025. That's what Public Works Committee has been talking about.
Just milled and overlaid Shimcore.
We did. This would be seal coating.
Okay.
This- Seal coating, not overlay. And that Bolton Menk got me figures back. Should be about 125 to take care of that. So there you can see we have the funding coming in. For there, we have the levy that we have, but then we're also getting the transportation account funding. This was the new funding that was passed by the legislature for small cities to get. It comes from delivery fees and then a sales tax. Now, whether or not you agree with those, whole nother story, but this is funding that is slated for us that helps us out.
When is Second Street planned?
Second Street, that's one I don't have in here because I'm billing that as more of an infrastructure project. Looking at utility work, slip lining things we've been talking about, potential pipe bursting. We haven't figured it all out yet.
That's gonna be a fun one.
But that one, you know, when we talk finance on that end of thing, let me get back. My beloved levy comparison calcs. That's where I have this up here. Whenever that is triggered for the Second Street Northwest project, 29, 30 bond-ish in there. So I'm kind of placeholdering. That's where I'm placeholdering that one because I figured it'll be a bond issuance on that front. Pulling it all together. And the 435, we talked about that quite a bit already when we were talking about the Bobcat, so I won't go into that too much in detail since we talked about 25 there. And that's what I have for the CIP. Any questions, comments, observations on that?
We have a batwing mower.
Batwing mower, I've got nothing budgeted for it.
Oh.
Kyle and I have been talking and the conversations have been, we're about one park away
From a batwing.
from a batwing mower being pretty darn useful. And the disc golf course could be that park, quote unquote park.
Do you get a signal too?
Yeah. No, just a noise when he pulls it around.
Just kidding, Kyle.
Talked about that, similar to the park side by side. We're doing some more detailed work on it at this point to see how that fits in. But even at a batwing mower, fund balance is still sitting pretty
Oh,
good.
yeah.
Not that you spend it for the fun of spending it, of course
No.
not, but allows that flexibility. That's what I've got in CIP. Winter parking ordinance amendment. Too far. Take it back. So the Public Works Committee has been talking on the winter parking rules that we currently have in place. Shuffle my notes here as I get there. Slept terribly, so my mind is like, I gotta write notes now rather than having it up there. So the current ordinance that we have in place utilizes date range along with various restrictions for parking enforcement. There's actually two tiers in here when we look at it. You have the definitions up here for blowing snow and snowfall, which an accumulation on the street of 2 or more inches, and that applies to blowing snow and snowfall. And that applies when we look at general prohibitions here. Because it specifically uses that term snowfall and periods of blowing snow, so it refers to those definitions when we talk up here in 7102A. The one we generally look at the bulk of the time is this one down here. That's our 1-inch rule. So between November 1st and April 1st, no motor vehicles shall be parked on either side of the street when there has been 1 inch or more. So how this dual structure works, it really targets when we do our enforcement action. When do we give out tickets? When do we do towing? This is really what this targets. And so the current ordinance, if it's between November 1st and April 1st, if there is more than 1 inch of snow at any point in time, enforcement action can be taken. It can be ticketed, can be towed anytime between those time periods. The second layer is when it's outside of November 1st to April 1st, if there's 2 inches of snow, we can still do enforcement action. A little bit convoluted when you really get into the weeds of it. Really, this is the one that it's been used historically. This other one is up here really hasn't been touched. So as a matter of practice, this is the one that has been leaned on. The proposed ordinance would repeal those sections. It would repeal that snowfall and blowing snow. So the 2 inches are now gone. It would repeal those sections regarding to the 1.5 inches and their time range. And it would replace it with winter parking would be November 1st to April 1st. So it ensures that stays instated. But instead of any time, enforcement action would be limited between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. since that's when the bulk of their snowplow operations occur during a winter season. So between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. if there's any accumulation of snow. If it's still snowing in the air or stuff has hit the ground, can't be parked on the street. And some of the genesis occurs when we look at this in the 1 inch. Some parts of town, you get 1 inch and it's clearly visible. Other parts of town, it blows and there's none. But we're plowing the entire town anyway, so you get some residents who say, there's no snow outside, why am I being told to move? And then the other parts of town that do have snow. So to clean that up and make it a bit more clear, if there's any precipitation, whether on the ground or in the air, between 2 and 6 a.m., get your car off the street. This also allows, since the majority of days in the winter, you don't have snowfall events, this also then allows, it's not just 2 AM to 6 AM, get it off the street regardless of there's snow or not. If there is no snow or there hasn't been any snow, you can park on the street between 2 AM and 6 AM and you won't be facing enforcement action. So it's trying to strike that balance of allowing people to be on the street, but then also having targeted enforcement between these date ranges and these hours. Kyle, anything on that?
No, I think you covered it really well.
Do we,
I'll show them my picture on why we kind of want
Yep.
do we have a lot of issue?
Right there is a good example.
Oh, my.
You can't fit through when you got a 12-foot blade. That's about 1 inch of snow, maybe. We bladed off. Mechanically removing snow is the way to do it, so you use less salt. So that's what MPCA everybody recommends. We got the equipment now. We can bust through town and have everything plowed curb to curb with an inch in 2 hours or so. So that's what we usually like to do. And this was around the corner, and I couldn't get through, so I had to back all the way around, and I had to back up and then do a little dance, and yeah. So that's that was it's really frustrating when things are like,
Oh, yeah, that's not naming places.
nope,
With
Probably
the
right,
change now, when we used to contract, it was always 2 inches before we didn't call in the contractor, so it was pretty much set. But now that we brought it in-house, and they may want to get out when there's an inch, and so we do want to get people off. That's what we're trying to solve here.
and it's just not, I mean, it's even salting and it's even, you know, I mean,
You know,
we'll use our best judgment when to tow, when not to tow. But when you're going through with a big truck and you can't fit through it, then that's when
And we've contracted now with the tow company, so we want it clear, so there isn't, because we've had that before where someone's got a ticket and out there with the ruler and said, no, I only got 1 3/4. You guys gave me a ticket, and that's, so now we're just cleaning it up. So
Yeah, like in this instance, we
it's
didn't tow
straightforward.
because we didn't, is it 1 inch? Is it 3/4 of an inch?
Yeah.
7/8 of an inch? Even
You
inch
want
and a half?
Clear with everyone.
It's just tough to,
And then the only change, we'll have to make new signs, obviously, but we think that's gonna be minimal, a couple hundred,
Oh,
$300. Is that what
yeah.
you came up with? Something, I don't remember our number,
Yeah.
but very minimal but we want to then properly make sure we get everything signed, long as we're doing it, make sure 25's done, get everything we need to.
Makes sense.
I think it also clarifies, I think this will also help with the residents. It's very clear, concise rules on the whole thing. And so it's not inch this, but then this.
You're still gonna have the one.
Here's a date range, here's a
argue.
time range. If there's any snow in the air, on the ground, get off.
and that is nice having the times that, because honestly, we can tow in the middle of the day, but it's like, we don't want to tow people in the middle of the day, so we'll bust open the roads, get them open, and then we come back during our, normal time to remove snow, which is usually between 2 and 6, so.
Just unfortunate though, you're out there, you want to get done and
Yes,
just like anybody else.
yep.
Yeah, that would be my question. So if, it wasn't, say midnight, well, it could be midnight. If this isn't at 3 AM and it's at 10 PM, then that's acceptable.
10 PM, so they can still be, so if it snows, this is 10 PM. And then we haven't done operations. Between 2 and 6 AM, they got to be off the street.
But again, if Kyle is plowing at 10 PM, this is acceptable.
Yes.
Technically, yeah.
Technically,
The idea being is that his
Can't
targeted
spend
time
Forever.
for clearing curb to curb is 2 AM to 6 AM. That's 2 AM and 6
Because
AM.
there's
is when
nobody
Public
on the
Works
streets.
Wants it clear.
Right.
this wasn't.
those are similar times to like bigger cities too,
Mhm.
Minneapolis. And
So
stuff.
common. And then, of course, we talk about education, we'll educate people, we'll get stuff out in all our avenues and.
Right.
Social media, we
Yeah,
We talked about
newsletter.
having
Send it out in the water bills, yeah.
Yep.
usually.
Yeah.
we talked about that earlier.
I would
making sure
even
that goes out.
suggest when we do it, maybe that's the only thing that's on it for that month is just explaining this or,
Headline.
so it's clear,
bold.
yeah, or a big majority of it, so it's
The
clear.
thing is though, it doesn't matter if you put it in flashing
No,
lights.
I know, but we've
Well,
done
we've
the
done
best
our
we can.
I know.
We got to be able to say, we did our education piece.
You know how it is nowadays, unfortunately.
Any other comments on this?
Nope, I think it's great.
So those would be the proposed change to the winter parking rules.
meet Kyle at 1:59 a.m.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, I like getting out there before.
No, it just means before 2 just means before 2 a.m. we'll plow you in for free.
Well, he's in luck. I've got a plow. I'm just kidding.
Then the final one on here talks about our water shutoff procedures currently have. I've heard in the past, and having been here less than 2 years, I've heard in the past that shutoffs were done at one point, then they went to the wayside. I don't know the entire timing of that history. But in my experience in the cities I've worked for, as well as several other cities I know of, shutting off utilities is a normal thing that cities do. Similar to natural gas utilities do it and electric utilities do it. This is very common. In our current ordinance, we do have a procedure for water shutoff, but refreshing the ordinance as a whole is a good thing. Just to reset that clear timeline. The other part that also gets cleaned up in this is with the old ordinance. I'll get to that here. We have this little section here where it says payment shall be due by the 1st of the month. If payment is not received by the 10th of the month, then you get charged a penalty. So the due date is the 1st, but you don't get penalties until the 10th. What that means is the real due date is the 10th because there's no incentive for paying on the 1st. Why? You're not getting penalized in any way whatsoever. This also cleans this up. The proposed language would set it to the 1st of the month, and that's when penalties would be applied. So right now, even though they're due on the 1st and we get bills in on the 1st, we can't process our utility bills until we do the penalty application. So we have to wait in house until the 11th before we can process utility bills, even though we read our meters at the start of the month. There's now a 10-day lag between when we can actually process. Because of doing that process, we have to do a penalty calculation and then we run the utility bills in our software. This then moves up the timeline. So if it's due on the 1st, as soon as we get the readings in, we can then go ahead and process bills sooner in the month and get them out sooner. So instead of bills coming out mid-month, we could get them out earlier for residents to have in their hand.
So do you have any data which shows how many people are paying by the 1st compared to the 10th? Because, right, like, I look at this, people are going to go, you just took away 10 days.
Agreed. Agreed.
Grace
But if we can move when they get out sooner by 10 days, then it's, so, if we can't get the bills out by the 15th, which has been about right, I wouldn't support this, but if we're getting the bills out 10 days sooner, they got their 10 days back.
Technically.
Yes, but from a personal budget standpoint,
Yep.
it's a paycheck. It's a, you know what I
If
mean?
they get their
Like,
bill on the 5th, that gives them 3 weeks. They'll go through 2 payrolls.
right. But if they usually pay it closer to the 10th and now they have to pay it earlier in their paycheck cycle, that is it could have a big impact on families.
Could.
I could see that.
Could.
If they're
So-
used to paying on the 9th or the 8th, and that's when it works because they're going paycheck to paycheck.
Yep.
Now all of a sudden it's shifting it back a week, that might throw off their personal finances.
Well, for a month or two.
Mhm. So again, kind of like the street, we've got to be very clear because, right, you're saying on the 2nd month, they're getting notice of shut off.
Yes, so how timelines work. For the shut off, it's actually very similar between the old ordinance and the new ordinance. The old ordinance just words it differently. But your timeline will look something like, okay, you get your utility bill this month, it's due October 1st. Well, since we're here, then we push out bills, you get your bill in September, now it's due on the 1st. Okay. The 1st of October comes, doesn't get paid. At that point, it also aligns with the other benefit of the 1st, not from the personal finance side, but when we do utility bills at the beginning of the month, the delinquency letter would go in with that second utility bill. So we're doing one mailing instead of 2 separate mailings on the delinquency notice. The delinquency notice would say, if you don't pay by November 1st, we're going to turn you off. November 1st comes, so now you've had 2 months to get paid up. We've added an extra step in the new ordinance, which then Public Works will have door hangers. Public Works will write the date and time. No sooner, you can't do it sooner than 48 hours from when the door hanger goes on there. Because that's too sudden, but post 48 hours after the door hanger goes on the door, that's when Public Works will come shut you off. We do that just to make sure we accommodate Public Works' schedule in case they have something they're doing, we can
We,
get that.
we
scheduled.
currently kind of do that. Door hangers are what saves the day in the end.
So the old ordinance doesn't call for door hangers. The new one gives that extra step, extra leniency of the door hanger in that, on top of that. So you, from start to finish, it's a little over 2 months for when a shut off would happen. Under the current ordinance, if you use the existing structure, it would be about 2 months on that.
2 months of non-payment, not 2 months of delinquent payment.
Right, 2 months of non-payment.
Okay.
Right. So it'd come due after that first month not paid, then you have 30 days after that, and then door hanger time after that.
Is it like a straight penalty? You know, like the fee?
Yes, 10%, and it's been that way for many years. 10% is very common with cities.
Or late water bills or shut-offs.
Late utility bills, as
We
far as
already have
financial.
shut-offs in our fee schedule, correct? We
Yes,
charge for shut-offs and,
yes.
yeah, I think it
55,
is
something like
50.
that. Turn it off and then turn it on.
But I think to your point, Peggy, about the hardship or the potential of it, I don't think there's any reason we could not, say we start this January 1st, we could set something where it's the first now, but we'll, for the next 2 months, we'll waive late fees. We could do something like that too, just to help those few people that it may be. I mean, it's an option we could look at. It's certainly something I'd probably support just for that
Yeah.
reason. We could waive them if, you know, or if they're before the 10th, we waive them. If they're after the 10th, maybe we, you know, we won. So we
Yeah.
could- I think we could help in that aspect to get people
Um,
used to it in that cycle of paying on the first.
And one current practice that we do have and we do implement, if you know you're not going to be able to make payment by the 10th, if you call in and tell us, we aren't going to charge you a late fee. If you're communicating with us,
Right, you're not just stiffing.
we're not going to stiff you.
Right.
I
You
think-
say, hey,
I think we can.
I can't pay it till the 11th.
Yeah.
I know it's the 10th. Okay, I'll have the money. And we go, okay, good. You called us. It's great. We're not going to apply penalties.
Yeah, but right, like, you know, in existing today, I pay it on the 10th, whatever. Future state by the 10th, I've already got late fees and a notice if I don't pay, I'm getting my water shut off. Before last month, I even had to pay my bill. You know what I mean? If we're mailing the bills out sooner, they're going to get their nasty gram before the 10th of the month when they think and have for many years been able to pay it. I mean, that would be another question I would have is how many years have we allowed this 10th of them?
Probably forever.
So again, I think there's an education piece.
December 13th, 1999.
Yeah, so as long as I've lived in town. So I think we just have to be very diligent in,
Yes. It's
Right.
It's similar to the winter parking rules. We're getting that in the newsletter. This would not be like an immediate, hey, slam it in now, let's go. We would want, I would say even a longer time than the winter parking rules to get this out, do mailers, let people know that this is, like you talk, if we were to adopt this in October, let's talk a January 1 beyond start point. So we're making sure people are educated and they know, and they may even have an opportunity to adjust their finances in advance to make
Yeah.
sure that they're prepared for that first.
yeah, and right, because I'm sure there's people that have it set up to automatically pay on the 10th of the month.
Probably.
Yep.
Because that's what I have it until, right? So we've got to, again, so they may not even look at their bill. They may not read the newsletter. So I just think we've got to be,
I
Right.
don't set mine on auto pay because it's never the same each month. If it was the same, I'd set it on auto.
but right, I know there's plenty of people that like, again, whatever that last day is, that's, I'm not
Yep.
giving my money up until,
Yeah, I know plenty of people like that.
Yeah, but
See 'em
that's
every-
different than the ones who can't do it.
Yep.
Right.
But again, I
They'll
think
just
we've got
change
to,
it from first. I mean, the
Yeah.
education piece.
You shouldn't,
10 days in there and then just have the 10th day be the first.
you shouldn't see it. Oh, yeah, you would see a delinquency notice because that would come automatic. If you paid the first month's late, yeah, you would automatically see that even though you paid your previous months, wouldn't you?
if you paid
It
it
went
after
out
the
before.
first.
After the
yes.
first, yeah,
You get a delinquency notice with your second bill.
even though you
No,
technically
no, you
weren't
pay it.
delinquent.
You pay it up. I mean, then it goes away, of course, but.
Right. So like if you got your Excel bill after you paid it and it said you were late, but you weren't, throw that part away.
I don't know, I've never had to worry about it.
Education, so.
Yeah,
And for this implementation date, we talk about very extensively. Like I said,
Mhm.
you could pass the ordinance, but you have an effective date, January 1st, February 1st, whatever you feel that time frame is to do proper education.
I think January 1st is a good implementation date, but we just got to give grace.
I would argue it's not a good, just because of the holidays and all of that. I would look for an end of Q1 being, right, you've got your seasonal employees, you've got,
I think if we look at, get some of the numbers, I really think it's a handful of people. And
Right.
if we're talking about doing the snow ordinance on starting November 1st, and people can get towed for $135 tow, and we're gonna have enough time to educate that, we should have plenty of time, I would think, by the,
Well, I'm
it's
just
just
saying,
my thoughts, but maybe the numbers might be different. Maybe it is a ton of people who are.
but I'm just saying you can come up with an excuse at every quarter.
Yeah.
For what's going on in people's lives. There's quarter one, and then you got taxes, end of quarter one, beginning quarter two. You know what I'm saying? There's always something going on in people's lives. Where do you stop and start?
There'll always be a small frequent flyer
Yeah,
list.
we can talk about that.
I don't know, just first of the year, new year, new thing. I don't know. That's the way I look at it. It doesn't mean it's right.
Mull it over, we'll bring it back to the
Yeah.
next workshop.
All right, anything else on that one?
Mm-mm.
That's all I have.
That's everything? Wonderful, then we are adjourned.
Glued back
Oh,
together.
they're glued.